that Daniel Davis is running for mayor.
I mean, he's been running it. I was at an event, earlier this year, end of last year, and it was a non-political event, and he was, just doing what a chamber leader does, talking about the economy, talking about how he wants it to grow, and it was 100% a stump speech. Because if you're talking about economic growth, if you're talking about the future of Jacksonville, there is a certain overlap between a mayoral candidate and a chamber president.
Yeah, and I mean, you were here covering when he was in the state house, made the decision to, become the chamber president. He lost a leadership race in Tallahassee, correct?
If I recall correctly, yeah.
Yeah, and so basically, he came back here, and he kind of had a long range plan for this. I
Right.
mean,
He was with the Home Builders Association, and then over to the chamber, and clearly has that mix of businessy things and political things, that can meld well for a campaign.
yeah, so he's got a lot of advantages here, but he's obviously not the only candidate in the field. He's not the only Republican who's a serious fundraiser. Jacksonville City Council member Leanna Gutierrez Cumber, she has nearly 2.3 million in her political committee, more than 250,000 in her campaign account. That's pretty big money. Ben, I want to come to you here because you broke the story on Twitter of Davis getting officially into race. You've also raised some concerns about um, the Jacksonville Chamber funding formula from City Council. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Well, there's been a lot of discussion about the money that's coming from the city of Jacksonville to the chamber, and coming up currently, I believe it's $750,000 is going to go to the chamber, projected anyway at this time. Now, with that being said, those concerns have been expressed by a lot of people, right? Now, I got some numbers yesterday that I didn't put out there, but the chamber used to get $500,000 a year from the city of Jacksonville before the recession in around '08, '09. So these numbers actually now, the 750, you could argue is more than in line with what the previous numbers used to be. And those numbers have incrementally gone up since about 2013, 2014. It started about $300,000. So it'll be an interesting discussion about these numbers. I know people are concerned where that money's going to go. Is going to be used towards supplementing the chamber as Daniel Davis does his run, and that's another question, right? What's going to happen now? Is he going to stay on at the chamber and make his 500 plus in salary and benefits? Is he going to take an unpaid leave of absence? Is he going to resign? Is there something else we're not keeping track of that we don't know? I know there's board members that aren't happy with the current situation, and especially if he stays on and collects money, collects his salary and so forth. So it remains to be seen. But the feeling I'm getting from numerous chamber members or chamber board members is that if he takes an unpaid leave of absence, they'll be cool with that.
So this is just one outlier in the chamber board. I mean, people, Davis advocates say that there's hundreds of people at the chamber and tons of boards and all of that. So there is more of a critical mass than that's being suggested, correct?
The problem is you have a chamber with, I don't know, you have, I think it's a 70, 80, you can tell me, AG. And out of that, it's like about, I think, 27, 28 people have a vote, right? You have an executive committee, and then you have the regular board members. There's some heavy hitters on the board, right? And not just dudes who are on the executive committee. So a lot of these guys have opinions, and women, and they want those opinions heard. They don't feel like that they're being informed about what's happening, right? Everyone knew he was going to file at some point, but they would have liked to have known when it was going to happen, officially be told about it before it was going to happen. That didn't happen with a number of people. So there's a lot of concerns. In addition, this is going to be a partisan race, right? He's running as a Republican. He may say some things that aren't in line with what the chamber stands for. You have a lot of people at the chamber where it's a nonpartisan body. So even if he takes an unpaid leave of absence, he goes out there and says a bunch of things that aren't in line with how the chamber feels about things, and then he would be expected to come back at the end of things if he loses the mayoral race, and then just start again like nothing ever happened. So these are some of these concerns that these people are expressing to me, and it's going to have to unfold along the way here in the upcoming months, if not sooner. He has his big announcement coming up next week. Maybe we'll get some light shed on it at that time.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. I mean, this is something Nate Monroe's brought up, this is a recurrent frustration. They've been over the Times Union, obviously, that so many of these movers and shakers in town, they'll say things off record, to all of us, but when it comes to actually taking action, they kind of fold in a lot of cases. So I mean, this is definitely something to watch and see if this time they actually break from that. And I want to get you in here. Sort of talk about the chamber's political heft in this town over the years. I mean, the Jack's Biz Political Committee, they go to great pains to say that it's not the Jacksonville Chamber themselves, but they've been increasingly active in endorsing, and they've endorsed across party lines, haven't they?
Yes, they have, and I think you saw that play out recently with the races in the special election, where the chamber wasn't necessarily supporting by some of the incumbency, but rather looking at the strength of the candidate um, and kind of the optics of the candidacy. um, I think Ben raises an interesting point, not just for Davis trying to resume position, but obviously the chamber will want to have a relationship with the next mayor, whoever that is. And if the president of the chamber has been, battling with an eventual winner, that could put the chamber in a difficult posture in terms of that relationship. But it's also just difficult when you're, look like you're hedging your bets when you're running for office. It's difficult to say that you're all in when you're holding on to a job and possibly still collecting that paycheck. So it's, I don't think, I think Daniel Davis is expecting that he's going to win. I think a lot of people in town see that as sort of like, the trajectory and in terms of the funding that he's got behind him. Those are the players that have typically placed people into office in Jacksonville in the past.
Yeah, and we are taking your calls here at 549-2937. Shelton, I want to get you in here, and I want to talk about the leading Democrat in the race and, sort of the Democratic side of the field, because we've been talking Republicans for about 10 minutes now. Donna Deegan, former broadcaster, philanthropist, we all know her, the leading Democratic fundraiser. She's got about $500,000 cash on hand. And she said her fundraising isn't like everybody else's, it's a different model. The Davis entry, does that affect her at all? Does that make the race more favorable to her? I mean, she's obviously got Audrey Gibson and another Democrat running too, who's not an incumbent politician. So, when you look at that side of the field, how does this Davis move into it change things for Democrats, if at all?
Well, this race really from the start's been Donna Deegan versus everybody else. It's really good that Mr. Davis has jumped in now, because everyone's wanted to know who was going to stand up and actually speak out on behalf of the 10,000 people in this city whose opinion actually matters about politics. We've got about 1 million people in this city. Maybe 20% will vote on a good day. Out of those, the rest will kind of do more or less what they're told. Davis probably bring a lot more money to the table, but he needs more money because he's not as well known to the larger population in this community. I thought he would have probably waited a couple more months to jump in, but I would assume he waited to see how things are going among Democrats. As we will get to with the sheriff's race, it's a situation where if all the Democrats joined forces and circled the wagons behind one quality candidate, they'd have a pretty good chance of winning. But as typically happens here locally, we saw that with the governor's race. You just wait for the Democrats to turn on each other, and then you slide in and pick the bones. Donna's a good candidate. Of course, she's a friend. I like her and all that. But the question, as always, is will people come out and vote? The turnout in 2019 was, I believe, about 25%. If the numbers are anything short of 40%, Davis walks away with it. Anything beyond that, it tends to help her out. But now, with this weakened statewide Democratic field led by Charlie Crist up and down, they're not going to be paying much attention to Northeast Florida. Washington's not going to be spending a lot of money down here. So Donna, as the leading Democrat here in Jacksonville, is really kind of hamstrung by a party that, I've said it before and I'll say it again, they lose elections on purpose. They did it several times just a few weeks ago, and you'll see more of that in the months to come.
Okay, well, that predetermination notwithstanding, I mean, that's an interesting point. And you seem to be suggesting, Shelton, that Deegan needs to run her own race separate from the Christ gubernatorial campaign.
Yes, yes. The DeSantis has already won this governor's race. That's pretty much done. If she follows along, she should take their money, take the influence as much as she can. But if she follows their lead, they're going to end up in private practice, much like Charlie Crist will be next year.
Well, yeah, that's what remains to be seen. But
Mhm.
we will see. We'll see what happens with that for sure. Polling shows Davis has room to grow. He's at 11% support from UNF's poll, 25% from Republican voters. Leanna Cumber and Al Ferrero both behind him. So it's interesting to watch in terms of how this will play out. It's still early. I mean, there was some suggesting that Davis would wait until after the governor's race to get in. He did not. My understanding was he needed to start running his campaign, but some will see that as a signal that he was responding to pressure to get in the race, and so on. So we'll watch that story as it develops. We want to move on to another story. A local activist actually got some movement from the United Nations. And I think we have sound on that from Ben Fraser. Go ahead and play the Ben Fraser clip.
We've obviously been making a head with this governor as it relates to his treatment of black people, particularly in the state of Florida, because we see this governor as being the mastermind and ringleader behind HB1, that anti-protest law which criminalizes protest, violates First Amendment rights, a law which is designed to punish black community organizers such as myself. You may remember that in January, the governor had me arrested. So we're going to Geneva because our governor is, in fact, violating international law. 1994, the U.S. signed an international treaty calling for the elimination of racism and racial discrimination. This is not some pie-in-the-sky idea and let's sing kumbaya. It is international law. We are signatories. It requires the United States to abolish policies that have the effect of perpetuating racial discrimination. We are obliged to follow the requirements of this law as any other domestic law, any other national law, international law that we sign.
Yeah, so that's Ben Fraser. He obviously went to Geneva. He talked to the United Nations Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination. We'll call that UN-CERD. And they addressed the Florida anti-riot law. The committee is worried about increasing legislative measures and initiatives at the state level that unduly restrict the right to peaceful assembly following anti-racism protests in recent years, such as HB1. The UN committee recommends that the U.S. take all necessary measures to ensure the exercise of the right to peaceful assembly without any discrimination on grounds of race, color, descent, or national or ethnic origin, investigate allegations of excessive force during peaceful protest, and of harassment, surveillance, and threats against human rights defenders of racial and ethnic minorities by law enforcement officials, and to develop and adopt legislation and strengthen its measures to protect human rights defenders, including those working on the rights of racial and ethnic minorities, indigenous peoples, and non-citizens. Shelton, I'll start with you. How likely is it that Florida follows the UN recommendations?
0.
Okay, why do you say that?
Well, I mean, the only way the Swiss are going to get any kind of reaction out of Ron DeSantis is if they try to blockade the chocolate. Beyond that, I mean, it's 2022 and we're talking about international law. Now, I love Ben Fraser, and I think he's absolutely right on this. What they're saying is correct, but as we've seen in, different situations elsewhere, cough, cough, Ukraine, international law is, inconsistent as far as how it's applied and what we choose to do with it. Now, it's really, it was a huge mistake, I believe, for DeSantis to have and for Shaw, et cetera, to have Mr. Fraser arrested. They kind of helped make him into a star. And of course, Europe loves him. He's an excellent communicator. He understands the subject very well. And with this sort of thing going on all over the country, it's good to have a guy like that that can speak on behalf of these of these issues and represent it credibly, it causes it does bring a lot of awareness of what's happening here in Northeast Florida and around the country to international audiences. But I don't see it being something that directly affects DeSantis one way or another.
Gotcha.
In fact, given his general nature, I could see him deliberately, finding ways to escalate and pile on top of that, just to spite the people that would come in and offer him some criticism.
Yeah, I mean that's an interesting take. I mean, you could see the backlash and the malleability of international law is a key deal. Ben, I want to get you in on this too. When we look at what happened with Ben Fraser, I mean, this was January. He attended a Ron DeSantis press conference. He was not allowed to be there. He was asked to leave. He did not, and he was briefly arrested. When you look at the media credentialing for these governors' events, was there legal latitude to block him from entering?
Hey man, I'm not an attorney. I can try
Right.
to play one on the radio for you if you want. Look, it just depends on the situation. I don't know for this particular situation what the ground rules were. I know it was a public building, as I recall, the Department of Health, I believe. So theoretically, you're allowed to come on in. Then again, at City Hall, that's a public building, but now you can't come up to the fourth floor anymore, like Ben Fraser did at one point. They restricted that access now. So to answer your question, it's hard to say. It's hard to say whether he was allowed to be there. What we know, eventually he was arrested and those charges were dropped.
Yeah, I mean, so there was definitely grounds for arrest, but they didn't follow through. Anne, I want to get you into this too, because when we look at, and also call 549-2937 if you want to get on the conversation. But as we look at the way press conferences and press events have been in Florida politics over the years, it feels like there's been more and more restrictions, more and more vetting of media. I mean, is that an accurate read?
Yeah, I mean, I think there was just some reporting last week about an event that our governor was at where the journalists wanting to participate would have to answer questions about what kind of coverage they were going to provide and give the organizers of the event access to any footage that they took, which is a really just kind of, I mean, absent any political element of, the parties, it's just really kind of a despicable, approach
Just that's a
to
chilling
the
precedent.
media and the freedom of the press, which is something that people should appreciate and defend no matter what their politics are. But yeah, there's definitely been, I think an erosion of, how people view the media and the idea that it should or could be used in partisan ways, and that people in positions of power should control that somehow. And, there's also been the issue of the credentialing, generally speaking at these events has been more difficult. The notice has been much shorter. The window of opportunity to kind of get a heads up about what's happening, get crews there, has been always kind of difficult with this particular administration. So it makes the job of a reporter harder, certainly. And, as to the Ben Fraser element, I mean, I think that they both find each other sort of a useful foil. I don't know that, what one side or the other in that back and forth has any effect on the other, but it certainly is something that they're both able to use to political ends.
Yeah, mutual amplification. And before we wrap up the segment, Tim, I want to get you in here on the actual law itself. I mean, there's a legal challenge. Fraser's Northside coalitions involved, the Florida State Conference and NAACP, Black Lives Matter Alliance. When is this law sound? The anti-riot law.
So also not a lawyer, but it will be interesting to see what that decision is. But in some ways, I mean, obviously the lawsuit is designed to actually change the law. But from a political standpoint, the showing up at the press conference, the showing up at the UN, accomplishes the Ben's goal of getting that message out there, of having the public widely think about this as a thing, because that to some extent is the most valuable thing that can be done absent actually getting rid of the law is having the conversation around it. So so as Ann basically said, the idea of using these things to amplify the messages, using the things to have a conversation around it, is in some ways the best that can be hoped for.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point. I got a comment here from Tom McGuire. He notes that not just black activists are threatened by HB1, the anti-riot bill, and indeed, I mean, this could be used to restrict a lot of groups, a lot of subgroups that may be protesting against the governor or his interest. Jim from Orange Park, you're on First Coast Connect. Good morning, Jim.
Hello.
Speak. You're on the
Yes,
air.
I just wanted to comment on the behavior of Ron DeSantis in general. I mean, he's clearly showing us who he is. You know, the way he's bullied Disney, he bullied the kids at that thing about the masks. I mean, the anti-rioting bill. This is a guy that doesn't care about the law and doesn't care about the First Amendment. He just very much like Donald Trump. You know, it's about me. You disagree with me, you will be attacked, you will be bullied.
Okay, that's an interesting point. Thank you. So, when we look at this, obviously this is an ongoing thing. The UN's only going to do so much, but Ben Fraser definitely made his point regarding DeSantis' anti-riot legislation, and it's interesting to watch his late career evolution here. Speaking of late career evolutions, former Jacksonville Sheriff Mike Williams, he's got a new gig. He's going to take charge of Florida Department of Law Enforcement's Jacksonville Regional Office, months after a stunning early end to a second term. You'll remember he moved out of town and had a charter violation and had to leave the sheriff's office, setting up the special election we're enjoying today. Williams, he's been rumored to be all kinds of things. DeSantis was briefly expected to pick him for lieutenant governor. He was in the mix for FDLE commissioner. And so on. But instead, he's going to be the Jacksonville branch manager, the special agent in charge of the Jacksonville Regional Operations Center under newly appointed FDLE Commissioner Mark Glass. Williams, he served almost 2 terms here, 7 years or so. He didn't solve the murder issue. He brought in body cameras, and he played a leading role in preventing the Republican National Convention from bringing its events to the city during 2020, suggesting there would have been a public safety catastrophe. But his decision to move to Nassau County, it triggered a special election. One good thing for Williams taking this job, it could help him with the state pension. The idea of connecting the pension is something that happens when people serve a late career in these roles. It's happening here too. Florida retirement system requires 8 years employment for vesting. An FRS employee who's vested gets 3% of the salary for each year of employment. Williams would be entitled to $43,000 annually if he retired at 60. Since he is still in mid-50s, his actual annual earnings would be about $32,000 a year, the Times Union reported. Williams is currently ineligible to collect any state pension. He does get a $90,000 a year JSO officer pension. But if he gets this job, he could connect his state pension to vest, and that'd be a lot better for his bottom line going forward. Tim, I'll start with you on this. Didn't Angela Corey, a former state attorney, have a similar situation when she left the state attorney's office? She had to connect the pension.
I would have to go back and actually dig into that. I was covering pensions at the time, which is a frankly fascinating and intricate subject. I don't want to speak off the cuff on Angela Corey's pension because there was complicated things there. But obviously you have people who are in these roles, and the Sheldon's comment earlier about the 10,000 people who matter. There are people who are connected, and there are people who, if they left their job the way that Sheriff Williams did, would not be considered for another post. And there are people who obviously are considered for another post. So, it shows the value of connections. It shows the value of, or it shows the way that things are done in Jacksonville, where oftentimes being part of the system leads to better outcomes for you.
Yeah, I mean, and Kent Sturman, he's one of Williams' best friends. He's also a close friend of Ron DeSantis, and that's a mutual connection that has surfaced time and again. Ben, I I want to speak to the new job for Williams. I mean, this seems like something he'd be qualified to do. I mean, who knows Jacksonville law better or Jacksonville law enforcement better than the former sheriff, correct?
Yeah, why not? I mean, he's been here long enough. I'm glad he's gainfully employed now. No more, honeydew list for him at home.
We don't
Want to
know
get
that.
out and do some things.
Yeah.
Maybe still doing some stuff. No, it's funny too. He never said it's like, hey, I'm going to go spend some more time with my family, when they leave positions, until you realize the family doesn't want them around anymore. So go out and, keep earning, get another job. So, but yeah, I mean, it's a good fit for him. Keeps them around. He knows the town, knows the situation. It's a comfortable spot. We'll see how long it lasts for him.
Yeah, I mean, clearly he's going to want to get that pension connected, so he'll be there for a while. And when you look at this, I mean, obviously the current appointed sheriff, Pat Ivy, he and Williams have a close working relationship. This should be good for interagency cooperation. What other benefits do you see from this, for law enforcement in this region, if any?
Well, there is some backlog issues at the FDLE in terms of how they're processing evidence. And I know that that's something that our local agency is very aware of, as our, everybody in local law enforcement has some issues with. So that's something that could be a priority for him in terms of, moving the needle on how quickly they process evidence for cases that they're pursuing. And I think that that collegial relationship could also be problematic if in fact, we were to see a sheriff, Lakeisha Burton, who has said she wants to have FDLE oversight
Right.
of officer-involved shootings, would put, the former sheriff kind of in charge of watchdogging his agency officers. So that could potentially be, a downside of that. I'll just say on the connection issue, that did in fact happen with Angela Corey. She got a couple months under Daryl Davis,
Daryl
the sheriff of
Daniels.
Clay County. Daryl Daniels, sorry.
Right.
I've got too many D's this morning.
Yeah.
She was hired just briefly there to kind of allow a bump in her pension and a service connection. But, I think it's important to note that people who work and earn a pension, deserve the pension that they work and earn. And so, the sheriff, if he is leaving 7 years on the table and is able to get another year, it's not that he didn't work the time and get the pension that he worked for. So I just throw that out there.
So there could be some actual benefit to the operational relationship here. We'll have to watch this one. Speaking of Lakeisha Burton, you facilitated a transition there, Ann. 5492937 for calls. Former opponents continue to rally to Lakeisha Burton. She's got 2 out of 3 Democrats endorsing her. That ain't bad. Tony Cummings and Wayne Clark have both endorsed. Cummings, the most recent. He cited her unwavering morality, steadfast leadership, and robust strategic plan to address crime in our city, among the reasons. That endorsement was well timed. I mean, Burton skipped a debate in town at the Fraternal Order of Police that she thought was leveraged against her. She's got a debate coming up here soon, next week, with TK Waters. So there will be debates, just that one, the police union, she said no go to. Shelton, you brought this up. She had 3 Democrats against her. She got 33% in the election in August. Why couldn't she consolidate that field early on?
And anytime a woman runs for office in Florida, you're going to get a bunch of random people jumping up to throw interference, and then the guy wins in the end. These four Democratic candidates, if they'd all joined forces behind one person, they would have taken that special election straight out a couple of weeks ago. Now they're coming around trying to play unity after however many months of talking behind each other's backs. I went to a sheriff's debate out at JU a few weeks ago. So you've got all 5. You've got the candidates out there. You've got all police union people and all this, and they had metal detectors. The most heavily armed room full of people in this city that I've seen all year, and they had metal detectors. And that just goes to show where things are at. Nice people, good for them, but the fact of the matter is Jacksonville, like pretty much every major city in this country, is controlled by like biker gangs and fentanyl traffickers, and the police are there to make sure little old ladies get to their cars safely, and any pretense of law enforcement or crime prevention or anything else is just you know, it's just chit chat. So let him go take his job and get his pension and have a good time. Nothing he says or does is going to affect the larger outcome now any more than it did the last 7 years.
That's a bit of fatalism. And we have one more complication. There's one Democrat who obviously has not endorsed. Tim, talk about Ken Jefferson. I mean, he's been running for this office for a long time, hasn't he?
You could view it that way. It will be interesting to see if the field can actually consolidate. I mean, obviously it's officially consolidated, but will Democrats actually unite in a way that matters? The entire kind of jungle primary sort of system does lead to some interesting dynamics when it comes to elections and runoffs. Where it only works if people who are basically enemies can become friends in that second election, and if it's not too late to matter.
Yeah, I got an email here from Bill. It's time for Ken Jefferson to get on board the Burton endorsement train. What's he waiting for? You tell me, Ben, what's he waiting for?
I don't know. I just texted him right now, matter of fact, to ask him if he's going to endorse her. So I'm waiting to hear back.
Did you get a delivered message read? What do you got from him?
No, it went through. I'm waiting right now. I mean, I don't know. Ken's a busy guy. He's on a lot of boards. He does a lot of stuff. He's probably in a board meeting right now with somebody.
Yeah.
But if I hear anything between now and
the lightning round,
I'll let you know.
Yeah. Yeah. So we got that to look at. And Ann, I'll ask you this too. I mean, we look at Ken Jefferson. Is there a likelihood that he could endorse the other way, could sit it out? There was a lot of negative advertising in this race, wasn't there? Between Burton and Jefferson in August.
Yeah, I was actually talking to Andrew Pantassi of the Tributary about this the other day, and he was sort of expressing confusion as to why she sort of responded to a Republican Party attack ad on her in Jefferson's name, and then kind of responded by attacks of her own from her campaign on Jefferson at a time when an olive branch might do more in terms of getting his support and his supporters behind him. And he didn't do great in the primaries, but he does have a chunk of people that like him and know him, and especially from his years doing TV crime analysis and stuff. He's recognized around town. He's kind of one of those like gets a hello from a lot of people, and so his support and the kind of the goodwill of his supporters would be really beneficial to her. But I don't know how toxic that relationship is, if that's something that they can remedy in terms of just trying to build, if there was a stronger Democratic Party unifying the players here. I mean, I think, like you said, we wouldn't have probably had a primary battle in the first place, among Democrats. So we'll see, what she's able to do to mend that relationship. But it's curious, her whole stance on the FOP thing is a little strange too. I don't know, again, what there is to gain by alienating rank and file.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, it is an interesting strategy, to be sure, and she does seem to respond more than front runner candidates tend to do. And there may be a reason for that structurally. I mean, Waters has a lot of money. I mean, Waters obviously got the DeSantis endorsement, but he's coming into September with really over $850,000 cash on hand. Burton's got about a fifth of that, and Burton got a lot of Republican money early on. Some of it may come back, some of it may not, but it's going to be an interesting thing to see if she can actually get to that 50% plus one threshold in the sheriff's race. So we will be watching that as it develops. But it's not just politics this week. We've also got soccer. I think we've got some sound about the United Soccer League. Go ahead.
Folks that know me know how passionate I am about the sport. Played all my life up until an injury a few years ago. But it's when you get soccer and it's in your orbit and it's in your world, you can't quit it. It's an amazing thing, and we've been working hard for years on this project to get it to basically the starting line, which is where we're at now. And it's been a lot of fun and a lot of work, and the landscape of soccer is ever changing, and so the timing now was just right, and the group is rocking and ready to go.
Yeah, that's the United Soccer League. The Jacks USL club is going to hopefully begin playing in 2025. They got 27 teams in this league, more expansion teams coming. Um, Tim, I want to get you in on here. I mean, you've seen sports come and go and come and go and go and go. Um, you know, what are strategic hurdles? These people want a stadium, obviously. So
That's the big thing. That's in some ways, I mean, the soccer itself is going to be fascinating. If you remember at the height of the Armada, it felt like people talked more about that than the Jaguars. There was a buzz around them, particularly when they played downtown. This is a town, particularly as it's growing, where soccer can be popular. So the sports business side of it is interesting. The real estate side is going to be fascinating. So the idea of the Armada floated the idea of building a stadium near the east side. It's not really clear exactly. They've kind of made noise that they still want to go ahead with it, but as a under 25 team now, that doesn't really make sense. But where would a stadium be? How can they make it viable? All of those are going to be fascinating questions as this journey continues.
yeah, and Ben, I mean, they've got partnerships. Florida Elite Soccer Academy, pre-professional teams. But it seems like a lot of the actions in St. Johns County. I mean, would a central Jacksonville stadium necessarily be the move if your feeders are more, toward this growing area to the south of downtown, or maybe they should think out of the box. Maybe even a stadium in St. Johns County.
Yeah, I mean that's a good idea. I mean, there's plenty of land. There's a lot of growth. There's more disposable income. Easier to get to. You can come to it from all four directions, so that would work. I always get a chuckle when I want to say this. It's always funny when you have these ownership groups that come out with the big name, the big celebrity out front. Here you got Tim Tebow leading the way, positioning him as the owner or something like that. And the reality is, whether it's Tebow here, whether it's Jeter with the Marlins, whether it's Magic Johnson with the Dodgers, whether it's A-Rod with the Minnesota Timberwolves, these celebrity owners have like a itsy-bitsy part of the action, and it's always a billionaire who's behind it, who's actually the money guy. They put out the face to be like the front man, but yet everyone seems to run with like, oh, Tim Tebow's going to own a team. Tim Tebow's not owning this team, all right? He's going to have a little piece of the action, and the big money guy is going to own the team. So I just always just get a kick out of it. Pardon the pun.
Yeah.
And on the side note to that,
yeah.
On the side note to that, whether soccer can be successful or not, well, as my 10-year-old would say, soccer's not a real sport. It's like, it's a recreation, like bowling or ping pong. With apologies to bowling and ping pong.
Yeah, that's those are fighting words, and I wonder if James from Orange Park, he's just called into the show. James, is soccer a real sport? And what do you think about the women's soccer component of this specifically? I mean, this is co-ed.
Well, here's the thing on that. For the U.S. women's, we're such an elite world powerhouse because most of our great female athletes do continue to play soccer. On the other hand, most athletes will start playing soccer at a young age because there's micro soccer and things like that. It doesn't cost a whole lot of money. But as they continue to excel in other sports where the pay is even greater, they leave that sport. Can you imagine that if we had some of our best, baseball, basketball, football players that played on the soccer pitch, we'd be a world powerhouse. Another thing is, athletes like LeBron James and some other people who are investing into European leagues, why don't they put their money into growing the sport at home? That's my take on soccer.
Okay. Thank you, James, for that. Um, so when we look at this ownership group, Shelton, I want to get you in on here. You look at the Tim Tebow name, you look at the other players. Um, are they better suited, like people like Tony Allegretti, better suited than some outsiders to get something that actually gets organic roots here, that actually grows and sustains?
Well, I think that Northeast Florida certainly is a sporting area. We support a lot of, shall we say, esoteric sports, from axe throwing to frisbee golf to, rugby and all sorts of other things. So there's certainly a lot of passion for it, and the soccer community is really strong in this community, in this city. I think it could do well if I were running the league. If I were running the team, I would say let's just do the games out at UNF where they do the Axemen games and stuff, and start to build a little bit of momentum. If it's 2022 and there's anyone that's seriously talking about building a stadium for soccer in Jacksonville, I assume that someone's going to go to jail because that's a wild concept. I mean, you'll see Ben Frazier going varsity in double dutch before you see a soccer stadium in Jacksonville.
That is a visual to enjoy, and that's a visual that will take us to our lightning round. Yeah, it's the quiet storm. So this is our lightning round. I want to go to throughout the round table and see what y'all are working on. Start with you, Tim.
So this weekend, huge travel weekend for Jacksonville, putting the Jacksonville International Airport on the path of its second busiest year ever, a huge jump after the past 2 years when there were true concerns of travel was going to fall off. And Airbnb is saying that Jacksonville is one of the top 10 destinations for the Labor Day weekend. So tracking kind of how tourism and travel is working here on the First Coast.
And what are you watching this Labor Day weekend?
Not this weekend, but just in the future, cool new philanthropic organization named after A.L. Lewis, who was Florida's first Black millionaire. And I just think he has the coolest family. Aside from the mission of this group, which is sort of health and education in the Black community, he has one daughter, Janetta Cole, who was in town recently for the civil rights. I can't remember what the word is for it, the meeting that they had. And then his other daughter, the beach lady up in Fernandina Beach, who before her death saved a lot of dunes and environmentally significant land. So I think it's cool that there's this new organization in his name, and hopefully his history will be remembered.
Okay, and Ben, quickly, did you hear from Ken Jefferson?
Nope, nothing from Ken. Nope, but I'm on alert. I'm waiting. If I hear anything, I'll put it out there.
Okay, and Shelton, what are you working on?
Oh, wait a minute. I just heard from him. Hold on.
Okay, go ahead.
Wait a minute. He said on the record, I'll be meeting with both candidates to hear their vision for a sheriff's office in the city and how they intend to implement it, then move forward from there. I also mentioned the party affiliation should have nothing to do with the sheriff's race. The race should be about the best qualified person for the position, not the party they're affiliated with.
So much for the true Democrat advertising. You broke some news here today, Ben, on Ken Jefferson. And Shelton, very quickly, like a few seconds, what are you working on?
Not working on anything today. I'm hanging out and finishing my columns, and I'm watching Rod Stewart tonight. I don't know why. Someone gave me a ticket, but I'll see you there.
You sure will. Okay, I want to thank the Roundtable. I want to thank Tim Gibbons for being in the studio. Ben Becker and Ann Schindler, two of the best journalists in town, joining virtually, and Shelton Hull, always the livest quote in Jacksonville, rounding out the Roundtable. In a moment, we're going to be celebrating 904 Day in Jacksonville around Northeast Florida. We're going to talk to a couple people at that. We will be right back.
Growing scrutiny of the governor's voter fraud crackdown. I'm Melissa Ross, and this week on the Florida Roundup, Some people who were told they were eligible to vote in Florida got arrested. Plus, education takes center stage in this November's governor's race as Charlie Crist picks an educator to be his running mate. Join us for the Florida Roundup, Friday at noon on WJCT News 89.9.
It's 70 days until the midterms, and President Biden is going on the offensive.
For God's sake, whose side are you on?
We got two big speeches from Biden, the same week as a series of eye-popping leaks from the Mar-a-Lago documents investigation, plus a special elections shocker in Alaska and a new round of boosters, all on the News Roundup next time on 1A.
Today, starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
Welcome back. Sunday is September 4th, or as some of us like to call it, 904 Day. So it's a great time to celebrate everything we love about the First Coast and also support our local businesses, many of which will offer special deals or host special events in honor of the occasion. Here now with some information on how you can participate are Hannah Ferguson, an account executive with Wingard. Hi, Hannah.
Hi there.
Welcome to the show. And also Jason Honeycutt. He's got a resume. Co-owner and operator of 1904 Music Hall, Underbelly, Spliff's Gastropub, and Ocean Street Tacos. Basically, if you patronize it downtown, he's involved. He's here also. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Great to have you. So I'll start off with the basic question. I'll go to Hannah. 904 Day, what is it? Why does it matter?
So 904 Day is a grassroots campaign celebrating all things local. And this year it falls on the Sunday of Labor Day weekend. So why not take advantage of the whole weekend and supporting all of those small businesses that you know and love?
Yeah, and this is about localism, local businesses, local organizations, local destinations, local causes, here and across the Northeast Florida community. And Jason, I want to get you in on this too. We talked about your business involvements. How are you celebrating 904 Day? I assume you got something at every place.
Oh, absolutely. Actually, so it is going to be one big event. We're doing kind of a block party downtown on Ocean Street and Bay Street. All the venues will be open. We have 9 Jacksonville or Jacksonville affiliated bands. We're tons of local beer, local spirits. Some local vendors, local artists will be out there. And we're just happy to celebrate all things Duval.
Yeah, I'm looking at some of these bands, and I'm a little past my clubbing days, but the Heart-Shaped Box Nirvana tribute band, Vlad the Inhaler, he's been around for a long time, and tickets are cheap. 904 in advance or $20 a day of the show. You obviously want to buy in advance. Jacksonville tries to be a walk-up town, but when you can save that kind of money, you want to save it. Hannah, I want to go to you here. What are a few other ways that listeners can celebrate 904 Day this weekend?
So it's pretty exciting. I do want to say that Mayor Lenny Curry has officially proclaimed September 4th as 904 Day in Jacksonville. Some great ways to celebrate. You could make a donation to a local nonprofit you believe in, shop or dine locally with a local-owned establishment, go to one of your favorite parks or destinations. Basically, anywhere in Northeast Florida, you can find somewhere to go and support 904 Day and all the businesses around there.
Yeah, and there are a lot of things. There's a Labor Day block party at Ava Sports Bar and Grill. 25% off merchandise at Intuition Ale Works. That's great for your holiday shopping if you're doing that. 904 Crazy Shakes at Sweet Pete's on Sunday. Food specials from the Hungry Owl Food Truck with Vagabond. And the special pricing in the axe throwing. And Derude also, the Sandstorm producer. Yes. So if you've ever heard that at a football game or you were a candy raver 20 years ago, probably that same song tattooed on your brain, you can check that out Sunday. You don't have to work Monday. There's no excuse to miss it. Hannah, tell us more about how our listeners can participate, including the toolkit.
There are plenty of ways to participate. The biggest thing is just hopping on your social media, looking up that hashtag 904 Day. You can see what everyone is doing. You can download that toolkit. So it's bit.ly/904 Day 2022. Tons of great materials for people to use if they want to go out and show their support. And then go to Jason's block party, 1904.
Yeah, and when's a good time to show up at these block parties? Because is it early, late?
Anytime, really. We have the Fritz will be kicking, Nightcrawler will be kicking it off at 5:30. So that's when the music starts, and it's going to go till about midnight with the Fritz closing it out. 3 stages, 9 bands. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, and that's something again. If you want to learn more about this, obviously the hashtag 904day on Twitter and social media. There's 1904musichall.com. I want to thank you both for coming in. It was great, and this is going to be a great weekend. And that's our program. um, yeah, pretty much. Thanks to all of our guests and callers. David Luckin is our executive producer. Our senior producer is Heather Schatz. Isabella De Silva is our director. Catherine Hobbs is our associate producer. Our news director is Jessica Palumbo, and Randy Brzeski is our digital editor. Have questions or comments about First Coast Connect, send an email to firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. I'm A.G. Gankarski singing for Melissa Ross, and you're listening to First Coast Connect on WJCT News 89.9 Jacksonville. We'll be back on Tuesday, but if you missed anything, you can listen to our rebroadcast at 8 p.m. and find today's show at WJCT.org and on your favorite podcast platform. Have a great Labor Day weekend.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided by Baptist Health and the